Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all of you. This is the webinar, Blockchain Impact on Solar Energy. My name is Edwin Coates. I will do a brief introduction on the blockchain webinar on about our company. Welcome to this unique webinar. We have underestimated the interest for this webinar. We thought it would be an interesting topic for a couple of guys in the industry, but over 800 people signed up, which says something about the interest for this topic. But first, some small advertorials about Solarplaza. For those who don't know, our company, the company I founded in 2004, we're organizing events, solar events all around the globe. We've done so more than 85 in more than 25 countries, and you can see the dots on the map where we have paid a visit. Quite an interesting journey so far. We have upcoming events. You can see here. I will also show this on the end of the webinar, and please feel free to visit our website to learn more about the events that we're organizing in Indonesia, North America, Argentina, Nigeria, Netherlands, etc. Well, the agenda for today, after my short welcome, we have 3 speakers. After each presentation of about 10 minutes, we have a short Q&A, 5 minutes. You can send in your questions through the chat box. We have a few polls during the whole webinar. And after the 3 presentations, we'll leave room for further Q&A. And we hope to end the webinar slightly past 5:30. Practical notes. Any questions you have for the speakers, you can either use the Twitter. I have a colleague, dedicated colleague, that's ready to retweet and answer your questions through the Twitter at Solar Blockchain. Please use that, and otherwise you can always submit questions through the GoToWebinar's question module or chat box. Any technical issues, also please use the chat box. And for you to know, the presentation slides as well as the whole recordings of this webinar will be available after the webinar itself, and so you can always listen back later on. We cannot deal with all the questions. Usually we get in more questions from all the participants than we can deal with, but don't hesitate to send them in, because we will use them to create new content for future events or for articles that we'll publish afterwards. Good. Yeah, some people and some experts say that the blockchain could be as disruptive as the internet was when it was introduced, and that we can't oversee yet what the impact and opportunities will be. Blockchain is about trust, public ledgers, cutting out the middleman. It's related to bitcoins. It's a distributed network supporting distributed renewable energy. It's about peer-to-peer energy sales and much more. Well, and in a blockchain-based market, a customer could switch to a different supplier every 15 minutes. Think about that. Each provider can link directly to a customer without the need of an intermediary. But actually, what is a blockchain, and how does it work, and how does this relate to the impact of the solar industry? What initiatives are already out there? This is part of the questions that we will try to answer during this webinar. So let's get started, and first of all, I'll show you some survey results for all the people that have registered, have answered this question. How familiar are you with the blockchain topic? And as you can see, most of the audience is very little to average involved or informed about what is blockchain. Very interesting as well. How much do you expect the blockchain will impact the solar industry? And here you see that on the average, people think that average impact on the solar industry, or very much. There are only a limited group of people think or confirm or consider that the blockchain will have very little impact on solar. So let me start with a quick poll question, and this is a good test to do this. I will ask you a question, and you can answer that. I will give you some seconds to answer this question, and we will live see the results of this poll. Please take your time and answer this question. I don't know if the poll is visible to the audience. The results is? Okay. So here we see that, yeah, most of you consider it a very seriously disruptive development. So that is very interesting to see this kind of results and not considered completely as an overhyped topic. You don't see the results? Okay, let me see if I can make that visible in an easy way. One second. Okay, I think it's. We'll try to get this the results later on the screen. Seems to be some technical problem to get this on. Let's continue with today's program, the webinar and speakers. What is a blockchain and how to use it for solar energy will be explained by Axel van Pervel. He is at PwC. Then we have Abraham Cambridge, the founder and CEO of the Sun Exchange, explaining going solar using Bitcoin and the blockchain, and we'll end this webinar with the Transactive Grid, the open peer-to-peer energy platform, a presentation by Scott Kessler from LO3 Energy. Well, let's get started with the first presentation. Axel van Pervel is Senior Manager at PwC, has a lot of experience in the consulting area. He's been a Senior Manager in Energy and Utilities team for PwC. He is an author of the studies Utility Companies on their Journey Towards Digitalization and the Blockchain in Power Utilities Industry. He's based in Berlin, and he will be broadcasting from Germany. Let me change the screen to one second, so I can give Axel the floor. Axel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I'll give you control right now over the presentation, so go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Edwin, for the kind introduction. Let me just check. No, yes. As you mentioned, I'm from PwC, in the advisory sector, specialized in energy, and my personal focus is on everything regarding digital in the energy sector. And of course, when blockchain came up, it was a topic which I took with my team to understand what's going on here and to analyze what the consequences are for the energy and utility sector. We cooperate strongly with different partners in the digital field. For blockchain, we have a partner called OneUp, a startup company in the Netherlands, in which PwC has taken a stake, and so we are also capable of not only doing the strategy and the concepts, but also the implementation. I'll speak about that a little later. You mentioned it already in your introduction, Edwin, that blockchain has really hit the ground this year with a big storm. We were really surprised how much attention we got from clients and also from the media with our blockchain study, which was the first more in-depth study on blockchain in the energy sector. It has been released recently in English language. It was initially for a German client, but it's available in English and also in French language by now. And so if anybody's interested, please come back to me or to the organizers of the webinar. There is a hype about it, that's clear, but the hype is not without any base, because blockchain will, even if not all the high expectations come true, and this is a chart showing the potential or the expectations some people have, that we are now in a situation where the internet was like 15 years ago. where the questions about security and how does it work and will the people actually be willing to trade using a blockchain technology, that these questions have been asked 15 years ago, and you can see right now where we are, and this might be a path which blockchain may take. And if you look at the energy sector in particular, it may really have some disruptive power, because the roles in the market will change dramatically. One thing is clear in this whole blockchain and also in more generally digital development will lead to a stronger decentralization in the energy field, a development which we here in Germany call Energiewende, energy transition. That's something which is going on anyway, and in our opinion it will be pushed even further by developments like blockchain. Part of the hype around blockchain is also that there is some myth about it, that it seems to be not so easy to understand, but actually, in my opinion, it is not that complicated. I mean, it's complicated if you look down into the machine room. How to do blockchain programming, that's complex, but the general idea is relatively simple, is that blockchain technology allows you to store data about transactions in a decentral or distributed way. So transactions which have been arranged between two parties, for example, selling a currency from A to B, a certain amount from A to B, that this information will be stored decentrally, meaning on each computer which is registered. So this is the simple idea about it, in combination with the validation process, because you could modify the data of the transaction if there was no validation process, and this validation process works in a way that there's a comparison between the transactions which are stored on each of the different computers, and they are compared constantly. So, and if there is a change in one of the copies of the transaction data, because it's basically one copy on each computer, if there is a modification in one copy, then there will be, to put it simply, kind of an alarm which will say that there is an anomaly, and then this transaction will be investigated further or will be deleted. So this allows you, this principle, this validation principle, allows you to have transactions between transaction partners who don't know each other. So this is the issue of trust. So you can, because of this validation process, you can achieve trust, and you can have transactions really peer-to-peer. So that's the basic idea behind it. And by having it decentrally or in this distributed way, it's very difficult to modify the data or to hack the whole system, compared to a classical client-server system where you always, like email systems which are stored centrally, you always have a risk of somebody attacking the system and actually getting into the system. In the energy sector, blockchain only works if you combine it with smart contracts. Smart contracts are like rules, rules which have been set for individual parties who, for example, if you take electricity, who will say, okay, I'm willing to buy a certain amount of kilowatt hours for a certain price, coming from a certain origin, for example, green power, or specifically solar power. And on the other hand, you have parties in this system which will offer electricity at a certain price, and then there's some kind of electronic trading which will happen, that the smart contracts will be executed automatically. So you'll have the peer-to-peer system is not only storing the transaction, but also helps to find the transaction partners and to arrange this whole market. So if you take those two together, that's the core of the blockchain idea. I'll skip this. This is a more detailed explanation of the validation process. The main idea or the main applications of blockchain technology generally are in three areas. One is the financial market transactions. Most well known is Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency, which is a blockchain-based system. There's one utility company I'm aware of, a German company called City, which is accepting Bitcoin now as a payment, so you can pay your utility bill using Bitcoin. There may be other examples out there, but that's one I'm aware of. Then there is a second main function main use case for the blockchain is the ownership registration, that you can, because you can store data about transactions securely. You can also store, for example, the history of certain products. For example, diamonds, as a company called Everledger, which allows you to store in a safe and transparent way the way a diamond has taken, where the origin is, from which origin it is, and who were the previous owners. To come closer to the energy sector, we're just doing a project with a utility company to apply this principle to gas meters, so that you can have that you always at any point know where the gas meter is and where what is the origin is, how long the valid period, how long it is still valid until it has to be I don't know the English word, the validity of the meter. That's an application in the energy sector. And if people say blockchain in energy, they usually mean peer-to-peer transactions. That's actually the example which will be shown later on by Scott, the Brooklyn microgrid, which has been the most prominent example of peer-to-peer systems. In the meantime, there have been a few more pilot projects in Europe and also in Australia with PowerLedger. So the peer-to-peer systems for trading the entire energy bill, more or less, it's a little more in detail, it's a little bit more complicated. But the second application is energy certificates. They actually trade the green energy premium, that you trade that using blockchain technology. And the third application is e-mobility. That you and ride sharing, that you do the finding transaction partners through the blockchain. For example, for ride share, there's a company called Lazuz in Israel offering this system, in Arcade City, which is Uber on blockchain, but also a project in Germany called BlockCharge, and ShareCharge is another one using blockchain technology to allow for the payment, payment of the charging processes, which is, if we go to the next slide, we will not go to the next slide. Here you go. If you, exactly, I was talking about this in the middle here. I don't know whether you see the mouse. But there are different applications where where the roaming system, a kind of a roaming system for e-mobility, is being applied using blockchain, because you don't have a standardized invoicing system right now. There are many different charge pole operators, and they all have separate invoicing systems. And if you can run that on the blockchain, it will be much more efficient. So here's again the use cases for the energy field, with a few logos and companies who've been active here. What's really interesting about it is that you can redraw the slide, or you can always add a new logo nearly every month, because there's a lot of activity going on, both from big utility companies, but also startup companies who are really active in this field. Now for some examples, I think the Brooklyn microgrid can be explained much better by one of the initiators later on. In the principle behind it, and that's why it's so exciting for the energy field, is that you have this on the left side of the slide, you have this hugely complex utility system with grid operators, with energy, with the suppliers, with metering companies and so on. And this can be radically simplified by using the blockchain, because all the transaction, the arrangement of the transaction, the documentation of the transaction, and the payment for the transaction can all be done in an integrated way using blockchain technology. The power still needs to come from the grid, so of course there will be grid operators, but the system can be radically reduced and simplified, and that's something which has led to this hype and this excitement about the technology. At the moment, people are saying, yeah, let it come along, this technology. They don't really believe in it, but I think we'll see in the next 2 to 3 years how this will really develop when the pilot projects become more mature and we really see a rollout of peer-to-peer systems. We'll see this. I believe that this will come. Now, overall, blockchain is a technology which can be used in very different scenarios in the energy system, in the energy field. As I said, it allows this decentral energy development to continue, and so for many companies, it's a basis for new business models. Cost reduction is really important. I mean, if you look at the financial service sector, they've been operating, or they've been founding consortia to use blockchain for internal purposes, for internal transactions between banking, between banks, and the main purpose behind that is cost reduction, and some other advantages which I'll skip now just for time reasons.
Yeah, please, Axel, can you finish your presentation? It's very interesting, but we have to consider the other speakers as well.
Yeah, we started later, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, here you go. There are some issues on the way. Just maybe as a last slide here, in terms of technology has to be developed further. The regulatory environment is a huge barrier to further implementation. And the whole issue, how much does it cost, what are the benefits for the different parties, that's something to be developed in the next quarters, really, in the pilot projects, how that really works. Yeah, I think I'll leave it with this, and I'll be happy to discuss with you later on.
Thanks so much, Axel, for a wonderful presentation. Very interesting. It seems like you're quite upbeat and on the speed how fast the development of blockchain will happen. There is also some questions. There are questions coming in about this. So, do you actually believe that within the next 3 years it will also take off in the solar industry or in the energy industry, like it went when internet started? There is, like, people saying questions like you need some critical mass to get things, like there is a sort of a tipping point when things really start moving. Do you think we're already there?
Well, I think I think we will not be at a. I don't think there will be one point where everything will change to blockchain. I think it will be a gradual process where, out of pilot projects where we are right now, into more mature projects, and then a gradual rollout will happen. That's my view on that. It will not be like one day everything will change, like the introduction of the euro or something like that. So it's really a gradual process. And of course you need critical mass. Well, at least it helps. But if you look at peer-to-peer systems, if you do it on a decentral basis, and we're discussing now with some regional utility companies to do such a peer-to-peer system on a regional basis, because the exciting thing about this, you can say you know where the electricity comes from. You can really say, okay, I want to have my green power from a regional producer, which is not possible with other systems so far. And I think it works also on a smaller scale with, I don't know, 50 to 100 or a few thousand people signing up, and then it will gradually grow.
And also very practically, so if I produce solar energy from my roof and I'm out for holidays and my neighbor says, hey, I want to buy this solar electricity while you're away, can we close a deal through the blockchain? Is that the way to go?
Yeah, I mean that's the idea behind these peer-to-peer systems. That's exactly the idea.
Okay, great.
The idea is of course also to do it in an automated way, because it wouldn't work if you have to go down to your basement to sell your kilowatt hours every 15 minutes. But you really need to. That's why you need those smart contracts, and you need a good app, some kind of a customer interface or user interface which works well to automate it, so that you say, okay, I'm out now for 4 weeks. Please sell the electricity at a minimum price of something. And if you don't, if the blockchain doesn't get it sold, then it should go to your heat storage.
The utility.
Yeah.
Or to the storage.
Either to the utility or to a battery or whatever. It can be defined quite very flexibly.
And that is all completely automated, so that sounds like a real cool application that you don't have to look towards anything of your system, that it's completely automated. You sell at a certain price. So everybody becomes a trader, kind of a trader then, can become a kind of a trader then.
Yes.
That's interesting. Okay. There's a question coming in, a good question. If all the data is saved decentrally on every party's computer, doesn't the data amount stored get very large at a certain moment?
That's indeed one of the issues, that it will. I mean, storage is getting cheaper, but it still is a big issue. And I'm not a tech guy, but my take on this is that we will have systems which will somehow distribute the data partially, because we've moved from at the beginning there was a full validation that everything was compared to everything in the this validation process. Now it's we're working with a statistical selection of transactions which are validated, and the same will probably be done with the storage, that you somehow split it up into, because otherwise it will just be too large. But that's still work in progress.
Okay. Final question before we go to the next speaker. I can see that the technology developments are going so fast. The question is if the regulators can keep up with this, and the question is coming in about what challenges do you see in the peer-to-peer market for these regulators to accommodate the distribution and transmission system operators as well.
Yeah, I mean, the regulators are not in the. They don't need to. they are the. They don't need to do anything if they don't want to do anything. So it's a question of the industry showing good examples of how it can work and which regulatory changes need to be done. That's a process between the industry and the regulators on the different national levels. So it's not something where we can expect that the regulators will move very quickly, but the industry has to make good suggestions on what needs to be changed in order to use all the benefits of this technology.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Axel, for a great presentation and your answers. Please stay within the webinar, because at the end of the sessions we will give some more room, provide more room for further questioning. Thank you, Axel, and let me see if the next speaker, Abram is ready. Abram, are you there?
I'm here, Eben. Hello.
Yeah. Let me see if I can go to your presentation and give you the right to use the mouse and the key. Yes, Abram. Yeah, please. maybe a short question in advance. So what is the actual blockchain project you're currently working on?
Okay, so the Sun Exchange is a solar finance platform on blockchain. And shall I just continue, or was that your opening question?
Yeah, well, it was just a brief introductory question, but maybe before you start, then let me see if I can, in the meantime, show the poll results from the first poll, because we weren't able to show those results on the screen, but I think you can see them right now. So clearly that most of you are seriously considering the blockchain as a disruptive development. Now that we think that we have the control on the poll system, let me see if I can do the poll that you have, the poll question you have sent us in, Abe.
Yeah.
A good question to start with all of you is, yeah, who's actually already dealing with and involved in the Bitcoins? Please answer this question, and then you can maybe use your question, the poll results in your presentation, Abe. So let's give it a few more seconds, and then let me see if I can make it visible on the screen. Since it seems like you already have some results. Okay, let me see if I can share the results on screen. Yeah. So, yeah, Ep, you can take the floor and maybe use the results of this poll.
Okay, so 50% of people have not owned Bitcoin. Okay, well, hopefully we can encourage people to start getting into this amazing technology. So the Sun Exchange is a solar energy finance platform where anyone can purchase and own and earn income from solar panels powering the developing world. So before I really go into things, I just want to just give just a little analysis into what is blockchain. What is the difference between the blockchain and blockchain? Well, you could ask the same question about what is the difference between internet and the internet. The blockchain is the Bitcoin blockchain. It was the first blockchain, and it is by far the biggest blockchain. In fact, the combined compression power, the hashing power of that network, last year was 80,000 times as powerful as the top 500 supercomputers in the world combined. It is a hugely powerful network of computers, and it is the most adopted blockchain, and that's why it's often referred to as the blockchain. Other blockchain projects you may consider to be intranets compared to the internet. And the Bitcoin blockchain is an internet of money. It allows money to be transmitted peer-to-peer globally. You'll see on my screen here I've written the Genesis block, but that is actually what it's called. It may sound grandiose, but that was the first ever transaction on a blockchain platform. It was on the Bitcoin blockchain back on the 3rd of January 2009. And with it dawned the start of a whole new era of technology. So you consider this block zero to be the equivalent of the first email or the first phone call across the Atlantic. So given that the blockchain is a money platform and it is able to transmit money and also generate money, obviously Bitcoins are created on the same network, you just got to consider from a very kind of top level perspective what that means in general. So you're developing a silicon chip that you power with electricity and it creates money. We, the Sun Exchange, are allowing people to convert that money created on a silicon chip into a silicon chip that creates electricity, which is then turned into money. So you may consider this to be the start of a completely silicon-based economy, one that it was clean and totally passive. But of course, we've just heard from Axel, this is going to be a long time coming. You know, our system's already built around us. This is not going to replace everything that we have already. So is there anywhere on Earth where this will be implemented very quickly? And I would propose that that is going to be Africa. Africa doesn't yet have the infrastructure. There are still currently 650 million people in Africa without any electricity at all. The population is increasing at such a rate it's going to reach 5.6 billion people by the end of the century. So the question is therefore, from where are they going to get energy? Well, the simplest, quickest and cheapest way of doing this is through solar power, and that creates for a remarkable investment opportunity. So before I go any further, I was going to create a poll here just to ask people what their outlook is on investments into Africa. So if that poll can be run now, that would be just an interesting result to get at the end. What is the biggest barrier to investing in renewable energy in Africa? Is it concerns about corruption, regulatory uncertainty, lack of projects, the cost of remittance transactions, or there aren't any barriers?
Well, it's on the screen right now. Give it a few more seconds, Abe, and then we'll close it and show the results. I think most people send in their votes, although you never know at the latest moment it can change what is the winner. We've seen that in the US. I think I'm going to close it right now and share the results on the screen.
Okay, so that's interesting. Concerns about corruption is the second highest, and regulatory uncertainty is the highest. Lack of projects, very few, and there are no barriers, very few. Okay, so let's continue with our presentation. If we can get rid of the poll screen. Okay, so if you look at the financial options for solar companies in Africa, you can consider that there's a PICO for individual solar side down at the very bottom end of the scale. And there is also on the mega scale, you've got various financial institutions financing utility scale projects. But for the commercial and industrial and community scale sector, the biggest sector throughout the globe, generally speaking, is being financially underserved. There is not enough finance going into these projects, and that's what the Sun Exchange is here to fill that funding gap. And it's not through lack of funds. I mean, globally, there's $3.4 trillion worldwide looking to go into clean energy projects that have been divested from fossil fuels. So the problem isn't lack of funds, it's the absence of a way of getting money into projects safely and securely. So of course, one of the biggest issues in Africa is of course corruption. I mean, just in 2014, there was a very famous case in East Africa of tens of, if not hundreds of millions of US dollars and euros were withheld from being invested because tens of millions were being moved into private accounts with no knowing of where it was going. And this is a huge problem because rural electrification, as I said, is a major issue. So if we can solve this, then we can get money to where it's needed. So the Sun Exchange enables anyone, anywhere to own solar panels. This means that if you live in an apartment in New York City and you want to invest into solar panels, you now can and have it installed and operating and located in the sunniest location on Earth. But as we've just discussed, doing business in Africa is risky. So to enable secure investment into Africa, we have built a blockchain smart contract which distributes solar energy revenue by the kilowatt hour in real time back to the solar asset owners. You may consider this to be streaming monetized African sunshine around the world. Now, doing it on the blockchain gives us two significant advantages. Firstly, it's totally transparent so that you know where your payments are going, and also allows prospective buyers of solar assets to look at existing projects and validate by themselves that they are actually doing what we say they are. Secondly, it's autonomous. So once you have a program running on the blockchain, it enables anyone, or in fact, sorry, once it's on the blockchain and it's autonomous, the Sun Exchange needn't actually service that contract. It's actually running indefinitely on the blockchain itself. So the Sun Exchange needn't be around in decades to come, and that smart contract will still be sending the payments from the prepaid meters on the solar plant back to where they're going to the individual owners. So this is just a screen grab of this what the Sun Exchange escrow account looks like. So payments are funded into an escrow held onto the blockchain, and then there's a smart contract that communicates to a digital currency exchange where those payments go to, and that just lives perpetually on the decentralized computer, which is the blockchain. So this is the first project that we did was our proof of concept back in March, April this year. So we actually raised equivalent of $30,000 or 60 Bitcoin at the time to collectively finance a school project outside of Cape Town. So 70 individuals from 11 countries around the world sent those payments. And that was actually the first time in history that Bitcoin had ever been used to finance a solar plant. The owners of those solar panels are now earning approximately a 10% annual return, and that's through a 20-year lease of their solar assets to the school. And the school, of course, got day one cost reductions for their energy. So that was our landmark project, and in our pipeline now we're looking at projects throughout the developing world, so not just Africa, but anywhere where there is a requirement for rural electrification and where it's difficult to get payments in and out of the countries. So we're looking at microgrids in East Africa, industrial sites in India, and schools, industrial parks in South Africa. So it's a real way of unlocking and facilitating investment into projects which have an immediate impact on the socio-economics of the developing world. Just a quick overview of SolarCoin. SolarCoin is a digital currency. You could consider it air miles for people that own solar assets. So if you own a solar plant, you can actually claim solar coins for it. One solar coin is worth approximately 7 US cents at the moment. So anybody that has financed a solar project through the Sun Exchange can claim these coins, and likewise if you already have solar coins claimed, you can invest them into a solar project through the Sun Exchange. And in fact, someone on our first project invested approximately, or purchased rather, about $500 worth of solar assets using SolarCoin. So they basically spent a token that they'd got from having a solar plant into another solar plant, and when they're getting a return on that and additional solar coins. So this is just another example of how this virtuous circle is going to perpetuate as time moves on. So this is just a screen grab of how the dashboard looks like on the Sun Exchange. We're actually due a relaunch in the next few working days, so if you go there at the moment, it's really just a holding page for our proof of concept. But in the next couple of days, you'll see a brand new project launched in there to solar power a tyre factory in South Africa. So do sign up on our website and have a look at that. Just as a wrap up, really. So the Sun Exchange is a radical fusion of distributed energy and financial technology. So solar power is the world of energy, what digital currency is the world of finance. And we are a collaborative solar finance company on the blockchain, enabling sustainable development across the developing world. So that is what the Sun Exchange is, and I do encourage you all to go and sign up and get involved with it. It's quite an exciting use case of Bitcoin and digital currency.
Thanks so much, Abe, for a wonderful presentation. Yeah, my first question then that pops up in my mind is, how do I buy Bitcoins and start investing in a wonderful project that may appear on your website very soon?
Okay, so I mean every country around the world, or most countries by now, have digital currency exchanges where you can set up an account and buy your Bitcoin. It's quite an easy process. So if you're in the US, you may wish to look at Coinbase. If you're in the UK, you may look at CoinFloor. If you're in South Africa, you probably look at BitX. So there's always a major digital currency exchange, and I just encourage people to look at the one with the largest amount of liquidity. But it's just quite a simple process. You transfer your funds into it, then you buy Bitcoin. But it's getting easier. You can even buy Bitcoin with a credit card these days.
And is that completely reliable? Is there any difference in the exchange you use?
Well, obviously the more liquidity in the exchange you use, the lower the price, the lower the spread. So if you look at CoinDesk, which is sort of an overview of what's going on in the world of digital currency, you'll see the average Bitcoin price. At the moment, the Bitcoin price is $780 per Bitcoin. And in fact, the Bitcoin price has doubled in the past 12 months, and it's nearly back up to where it was in 2013 when there was a major hack in the digital currency exchange, which really symptomatic of the technology in its infancy at the time, and now it's a power force.
Yeah, you don't see that volatility in the Bitcoin as a currency, as a threshold to get involved in the project, because it's the volatility of the Bitcoin versus the volatility of your project in South Africa being paid in South African rand, for example.
That would if you consider it a currency, but Bitcoin isn't actually a currency. It's a payment technology. So we're just using Bitcoin as a payment rail, getting payment from one place to another place very quickly, practically no cost, and in tiny increments. So if you just consider that it's only going to be a Bitcoin for 10 minutes whilst it's being transacted through the network, there's going to be very little volatility in that time. So by the time it's come from their digital currency account to ours, there's going to be little volatility.
Yeah. So that also
of course, many people own Bitcoins, in which case they've probably acquired them through mining, or maybe they get paid in Bitcoin, which is becoming increasingly common. So if you're holding Bitcoin, you're already exposed to that volatility. So we're just offering people that hold Bitcoin a very interesting way of utilizing it. There's few use cases of it worldwide, and we're just demonstrating a very interesting one.
Okay, a related question is, someone said, what does it take in terms of hardware to get onto this blockchain and to trade and get paid?
Yeah, so if you want to get onto the Bitcoin blockchain, you've got to set up a Bitcoin mine, which is basically banks and banks of compression chips. They're actually called ASICs chips, and they're basically compressing all the data that's run on the blockchain, and those computers are actually competing against each other to compress data into it. So there's mines around the world to compress this data, and whichever computer wins the lottery on each round of compression, they actually get rewarded with the Bitcoin. So that's where Bitcoins come from. It's a reward generated by the network to give to people who are running the network, and whoever has the cheapest electricity generally has the technical advantage. So a lot of the major mines in the United States, they're next to hydroelectricity plants, and in China, where that's actually quite a lot of mining where they've got cheap electricity. So one of our goals is actually to start solar powering Bitcoin mines.
Yeah.
So that we're turning on solar powered engines.
Yeah, sorry, Abe. Very brief question: is the service of the Sun Exchange is only so far available in South Africa, or are you planning to do something in India or other places?
Well, the projects that we're currently financing are only in South Africa. We're obviously looking at projects throughout the developing world, because if we can provide finance to those projects which are currently unfunded or in a funding gap, then of course this is a very interesting, attractive option for project developers and installers across the world. And Bitcoin being a universal payment system, it's a universal currency that's used Russia, China, US. It's totally country agnostic. So in a way, we're actually open to the entire. It's a universal payment platform. Sorry, universal crowdfunding platform for solar power.
So does that mean that you're open for developers that have an interesting project and that can be put on your platform or use the Bitcoin?
Yeah, this is exactly what we're here for. If someone has a project that is currently in a stumbling block, maybe it's a community project that maybe it's unbankable, traditional bankability measurement methodologies, they can come to us, we can look at the project, and we can determine whether we think and whether the community around us thinks the project is worth backing.
Okay, good. Let's thank you so much, Abram, for a wonderful presentation. We might come back after the next speaker for some further Q&A. So let's see if Scott is in. Scott, are you here?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, Scott, hang on there for a minute so that I can put on your presentation.
Sounds good.
All right. I'll give you the modus to use the mouse. Yes, Scott from the US. Good to have you here. Well, I'll give you the floor since we're in a little time constraint. So please go ahead, Scott.
Great. So my name is Scott Kessler. I am the director here at LO3 Energy, and today I'm going to be telling you all about our Brooklyn microgrid project that we heard a little bit about, I think, earlier in Axel's presentation. We've developed a blockchain-based platform for energy. It is not a financial platform, and one of the main applications of it is the development of community microgrids. It is not the only application. There's a few other ways we're looking to use it, but today I'm going to talk to you primarily about our Brooklyn project. Well, one of the first things I wanted to discuss here is sort of why do we have a need for community microgrids and what's happening with larger utility infrastructure. As you can see, the graph on the left, utility infrastructure is becoming more and more distributed, so the assets are getting more and more spread out as we install more solar, more storage, more other pieces of the grid in more of a distributed fashion as opposed to the centralized manner we've done it traditionally. And then we also see that the amount of solar is going up and up and up. So that the one on the right is contributing to the one on the left, and we really expect the amount of solar to begin to take off in the next few years. Growth's going to be pretty impressive. So why do we have a need for sort of the microgrid concept? You know, obviously we have a lot of distributed resources. Well, in New York City, this photo was taken during Hurricane Sandy, which happened about 4 years ago. A large part of the city actually lost power. And you can see it was a small southern portion of Manhattan there that actually retained power. So it's a really good photo to illustrate what the benefits of a microgrid are in the event of a severe weather event. And the area of Brooklyn where I work was an area that was hit very hard by the storm. There's a water body called the Gowanus Canal that floods and knocks out power to the area. So that's sort of one of the concerns. Another concern of the local community is they want to know if the green energy they are getting is really green. So right now, what people can do is they can buy green power from an energy supplier. And what that energy supplier does is they basically buy renewable energy credits from a large wind installation that is, at least in the case of New York City, it's never within the city. It's at least farther away at a different part of the state, and sometimes in a different state altogether. So when you are providing extra money for green power, that money is going to that installation, and the environmental benefits of that are actually happening where the installation is. So your electron is still generated by the nearest smokestack here in New York City. So the electron you are consuming is not actually green. You are merely providing some funding to a green power plant somewhere else. So there is a global benefit to that action. However, there is not a local benefit. Additionally, what solar owners here in New York are limited to is they have to participate in net energy metering, which is where the solar energy you produce can only be used to offset your own consumption. So there is a ceiling to how much profit someone can make on their panels, and that is limited to how much energy they actually use. So there's not much incentive to install a larger solar system than for your home's use. So we're sort of limiting the amount of solar that would be installed. Similarly, in a lot of European countries, they have used feed-in tariffs, where you are, locked into a one contract for often 20 years or more at a fixed rate guaranteed by either the government or the utility. And so that's sort of really reducing the amount of choice that consumers have. If in Europe you cannot do that. And if in the US you'd like to sell it, you cannot do that either. So what we are trying to do is develop a way that these prosumers, consumers who have solar power, are able to actually get more choice in the way they interact with the energy grid. So in an attempt to sort of address these efforts, we are putting together the largest and the biggest demonstration of our technology here in Brooklyn for what we call the Brooklyn microgrid. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that right now. So this is an illustration that I think actually we saw in Axel's presentation earlier, where you see on the south side of the street we have, I think there's about 4 solar panels there, and then we have a number of other consumers who are looking to buy green energy on the block. And this was our first proof of concept where we did the first transactions. We think it was the first blockchain-based energy transactions in the world. We did them back in April 2016. And what we did was enable the folks with excess solar supply to sell it to their neighbors on the block. And the way the market works is that each of the neighbors sort of sets what is their willingness to pay, and then you have a certain constrained supply of solar energy, so there's a limited amount of energy, and then we can sort of set up a auction or a bidding market where the highest bidders get the solar energy, and that is how you determine what the real-time price of that energy is. So We did this in April, and we are now looking to sort of grow the network and expand it and start to do a much greater number of transactions over the course of this year. So where do we sort of see this going? So at first, we have to tokenize the energy. So that basically means just get the energy and the energy attributes onto the blockchain. So that pure transactions without any sort of intermediary. From that, we are going to be developing that real-time price of energy. We think there's going to be a premium for that local energy, and that's going to drive a lot of interest in investing in solar in the neighborhood, as well as investing in other technologies like storage that might also benefit from a high daytime price and a low evening price. So we think that grows the amount of renewables in the local community. And as that growth occurs, we're seeing more and more of these prosumers arise who are then doing transactions neighbor to neighbor and actually keeping that money in the community. And then finally, we want to actually start to enable the community to have its entire energy supply be based on their own values and their economics. So certain communities are going to value local clean energy more than others, and there we are expecting to see there to be a higher number of renewable installations. So it becomes a sort of living ecosystem where the money on energy stays in the community and helps fund additional solar energy. So where do we sort of stand today and where are we going? As I mentioned, we did the first transactions back in April, and what we are looking to do is now sort of grow that pilot within the community. Simultaneously, we are also testing new business models outside of Brooklyn. So there's a number of interesting projects in other parts of the US, in Europe, and Australia that we are in discussions and currently working on. And then we're also looking to grow here in Brooklyn. So recently we signed a deal with Siemens where they agreed to provide a microgrid controller that would be fed off of data from the blockchain. So as I mentioned before, this is an energy blockchain we're creating. We are not creating a financial blockchain. The transactions within our network, they do not necessarily have to happen via the blockchain. They can, but really each transaction contains a quantity and an agreed upon price. And then there's really a third-party payment provider that can facilitate the actual they are using a more traditional currency, like a PayPal style payment, either one would work with our system. And so this is just sort of, we have some videos at brooklynmicrogrid.com. I'd encourage you to go watch them if you're interested. This is one of the participants in the videos, and one of her main points is that at the end of the day, electrons you generate should be your own. You need to do with them what you want, and that is really at the heart of what we're trying to do here in Brooklyn. So thanks for your time, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Okay, thanks, Scott, for a very clear presentation. I have to thank the audience because there are so many questions coming in. Unfortunately, we can't deal with them right now, with all of them, but we'll make sure that we take them into consideration for further content provision in the near future, maybe even for a live event, a conference or so, to try to answer all these questions. Scott, so some basic questions also coming in, and also very intelligent, smart questions. One of them is, who's taking care of the balance between supply and demand at the system level?
So at the system level, we are still making use of the distribution utility. The suppliers we have right now are at such a small scale. They are beneath 5 megawatts. And as long as you're beneath 5 megawatts, our local distribution utility really doesn't factor you into their system balancing plan. As soon as we get to a larger size, we will start to have to sort of coordinate with them in a more detailed manner. But for now, because of the size of the energy we're working on, it actually doesn't impact the system balancing.
Okay. Another question, and maybe a little critical on the side is, aren't you really, or actually just selling attributes, like you're selling the greenness, with the grid still delivering the same number of electrons as before? So
So our first transactions we did sell environmental attributes. In the next ones we are actually selling energy supply. So we are going to be registered as an energy supplier in New York State, just like any other large provider. And our supply will come from both local providers, where we will be selling the local clean energy, and then we'll also have to buy some larger supplies from more traditional energy sources. So we intend to be an energy supplier just like any other here in New York, and not just selling environmental attributes.
Yeah. Well, your project is still connected to the grid, is it? It's not completely off-grid.
Yep, we do not own any copper, any wires, anything like that. That is all still Con Edison, our local utility.
Yeah, and then is there any specific monitoring included that that you can really track all the electrons and track what the transactions are?
Yep, so we've had to develop our own meters that read the energy flows, both production and consumption, and then hash that information to the blockchain. So we have our own technology that does that.
And that information is available for all the people that are involved, or is it public information?
So we make each user's energy information available to them. We do not make it publicly available.
And this was in cooperation with the local utility, or how does that work?
We have been talking to them for a long time. They are very interested in our project, and we provide them with results every few weeks, but we did this on our own. They didn't provide any funding or staff.
And they're also not compensated in a way?
So at this moment, no. Eventually down the road, there's a future iteration of this project where we intend to tie the transactions to the physical grid much more tightly. And in that scenario, we would be providing some compensation to the distribution utility.
Yeah. And if you look at the customer level, does it entail and bring extra additional costs for the consumers, or does it bring them any benefit financially?
So for the prosumers, we're getting them a better return on their investment, because right now they do not get compensated for any of their excess production. For the consumers, if they want to buy local, we expect that to always be a premium product, and we would expect that to cost more than the traditional fossil fuel-based energy they are buying. They do not have to buy that, though. So it's based on both their values and their economics. So if they want to continue to buy the cheapest power available, we can provide them that as well.
Yeah. So so far the availability of the grid is crucial, and also in a way the cooperation of the utility, is it? So in the near future, even if this gets bigger, you still need to work with these utilities. Right? Is that correct what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah. We do not want to become a distribution utility. They have hundreds of years of experience doing this. There's people that are skilled in managing substations, installing new wires, all of the things the distribution utility does, and we want to work with them to make sure that in the future, where it's a lot more distributed and there's a lot more peer-to-peer transactions, the distribution utilities are still fairly compensated for the value they provide. It is a critical service they provide, and it's something that we will continue to need in the future.
Yeah. So to my experience, the utilities are not the most progressive companies around. So and this technology is evolving quite rapidly. Will they? Yeah, are they willing to cooperate in the near future to continue to help this development, or will they block the blockchain?
Yep, I would say that is why we think there's an opportunity for a small company like us to make such a difference, because companies are unable to change fast enough. I think that there will be a number of utilities that will not change. And if you look at scenarios like Germany right now, where some of the utilities are having a lot of struggles and dealing with a lot of assets they have installed that are no longer useful, that will continue to happen. But we think there are a number of forward-thinking utilities willing to work with companies like ours to investigate future business models.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much for a great presentation, Scott. Let me see if Axel and Abram are still there. Guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah.
Yes, I can also hear you.
Great, guys. So there are so many questions coming in. Again, apologies if we can't deal with them, with all of them, but I will try to come up with some questions that have been sent to us over the web through this webinar. Or unless maybe you can start off, maybe Scott or Axel or Abram, you have a question for one of your colleague speakers. Is there one of you that wants to make a comment on one of the previous presentations?
Axel speaking here.
Yes, Axel, go ahead.
I would be interested to hear from Scott. How did you implement it with the net metering? Because you said that you the users of solar power, the households have net metering, and if they sell the electricity, they will still have net metering, but they will have additional revenues from the coins they receive from the neighbors. Is that correct? But the invoicing with the utility company will still be the same, regardless of how many transactions have been going on via the blockchain.
Scott, did you hear the question? Scott, can you hear us?
The question was, what happens? I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, it's around regarding the billing of the net metering.
Yep. So the question was, with the net metering, what happens to the environmental attributes? And
no, how does it?
What happens?
Not really. Yeah, actually, maybe you can briefly repeat the question.
Does the energy bill for the household with the solar power plant, does the energy bill change? Does that depending on the number of transactions he's been doing on the blockchain, or is it? My assumption would be the invoice is still the same, but he will receive additional money from the tokens he's been selling via the blockchain. Is that correct?
Yeah, the second one is correct. So there is additional revenue that comes in and doesn't impact what their consumption would be. Basically, they are just getting a credit for what was sold in addition.
Yeah, okay.
I have questions coming in still. A question for you, Abe. Is there any political risk for investors on your projects? Because can the government interfere with this Bitcoin process and your project?
Well, that is an interesting question. So, as Axel said earlier, the regulators are looking at this technology carefully to see actually what kind of benefits can it bring. So in South Africa, the regulators are working closely with the digital currency exchanges. All they're really concerned about is reporting and understanding what kind of volumes of capital are coming in and out. But at the end of the day, we are providing direct foreign investment into the developing world. So this is actually a really fantastic example of a flagship, if you like, of what this technology can be used for. So it's unlikely this technology is going to be stifled anytime soon. And on the energy regulation side, the way that our system is set up is that the owners of these solar assets, the solar panels, are actually being leased directly to commercial energy users as a equipment asset finance. So equipment lease finance rather. So you're dealing directly with blue chip companies, very established industrial clients, schools, any kind of industry that's been around for decades and will be for decades to come. So those are the actual those are the relationships that are actually taking place between the energy user directly with the electricity generation owner. So the government is not involved in that process.
Thank you. Axel, can you elaborate a little bit more? How many of crypto coins or maybe even solar crypto coins do you estimate there are worldwide?
I can just refer to CoinDesk. Again, I think there are a few hundreds of cryptocurrencies, but most of them have no liquidity or nearly no liquidity.
So this is.
I'm not sure whether that really answers the question, but there are many currencies, but the most important ones are Bitcoin and Ripple.
Do you think that the other ones will this, let's say, market, this business, consolidate into a few crypto coins that will survive? Or?
I think you have to see it. You have two things. One is really a cryptocurrency which is directly linked with euro or dollars, where you can really make payments. And the other thing is that with nearly every blockchain project, you have this token principle, which has been mentioned a couple of times, and also in Brooklyn, I think you've been using a token system. And I think those tokens also appear as a currency because they are also traded on the blockchain. So this makes the number relatively high. But there's two different types of applications. One is really within the project to have some a tool within the project, and the other ones, the big ones like Bitcoin and Ripple, are really universal and can be used especially for payments.
Edwin, I'll just point out at this point that the market cap of Bitcoin is approximately $12 billion, and the second largest digital currency by market cap is Ethereum, which is approximately $500 million. So that gives you an example. You're looking at 24 times the size of the market cap of Bitcoin, and you can actually spend Bitcoins anywhere where US dollar or euro is accepted. You can even now get credit cards that you can charge with Bitcoin and spend them at point of use, over the counter, wherever a Visa card is accepted. So this technology is rapidly evolving.
Yeah, that's an impressive example. And talking about money, there is a question coming in. How does the Sun Exchange make money?
So yeah, we actually hard code into each smart contract a service revenue stream. So once we've serviced the owners of the asset and we paid for insurance costs and operational costs, and we're building a reserve fund for each project, we get service fees. So that actually acts as an incentive for any other administrator for the project to have an income stream if the Sun Exchange isn't around a decade to come. And of course we also build in a success fee into the project capital that's being raised. So if we're selling, if we're raising $100,000, we will take a success fee out of that. So our success fee is already costed into the project that's being financed.
And further to that, you talked about your presentation about the enormous amount of money that's waiting out there, ready to be invested. Would you say that there is a really threshold for really quick market development is the lack of reliable projects rather than the availability of money?
Well, there are the many projects going around, but at the moment the projects are stifled because there's no guarantees of getting funding. So in the current top-down model that we have with large development banks, obviously they're having to service very, very large pots of capital. It's only worth their while to finance $50 million at a time. But if you're a microgrid company developing microgrids in East Africa or Southern Africa, you can't build $50 million pipeline to attract the attention of the World Bank, and you can't be guaranteed on getting grant finance. So approaching something like the Sun Exchange to raise capital for that project is a very advantageous situation, because you can raise capital directly from individuals, and the projects that you finance can then scale from there. Because there'll be more assurance of getting funding, it should then help them scale up their own operations.
Okay. I think if we look at how the business model for your companies work, I think for PwC it's quite clear as a consultancy fees are involved. But Scott, can you elaborate a little bit more about what the business model of your company is?
Yeah, so we're in the process of getting a few demonstration projects up and running, which will actually all feed into the business model. The intent here in Brooklyn is actually to form this as a self-sufficient co-op. So it'll be owned by the members of the local community primarily, and it'll be up to them to sort of figure out what % of the transactions we want to use as a revenue stream, or whether or not they want to come up with a different business model for Brooklyn Microgrid. So we're actually going to be using the community to help us come up with that answer here in Brooklyn.
Okay. And so let me see if there's another question coming in. Yeah, do you have also, Scott, do you have any plans for going to Australia?
Yes, we do. We actually recently opened an Australia office and are hoping to be announcing our first project there pretty soon.
Okay. So what do you consider the hotspots for blockchain? I think that's probably a question to all of you. Abe already said like Africa is the place to be. Scott and Axel, if I ask you the same question, what do you think that the hotspots for the blockchain development and related to solar will be in the world?
So my perspective is that the most interest has come out of Europe. You guys are just nuts for blockchain compared to the reception we get here in the U.S. So for me, the markets where we think our technology has the most potential is the U.S., Europe, and Australia, and then Africa presents sort of a different use case, but is also really interesting. But the most interest in our company has definitely been coming out of Europe, I would say.
Wow, Axel, can you underline? Is this also you?
Yes, I can just follow up on that because Scott, we are really proud that finally we have a digital product, something coming out of Europe, where we've taken the lead, and it's not the Googles and the Facebooks coming over from the US. This time it's Europe, and trying hard to keep the small advantage we have at the moment in terms of projects. I think at the moment most of the projects are indeed in Europe, and but as mentioned, we see some activity in Australia, surprisingly little in Asia, and of course in the US.
Yeah, let's not forget the U.S. because LO3 is working hard on this. Guys, although we have still not a lot of people leaving the webinar, I think it's almost time to close it. Yeah, what do you expect? Is the blockchain? Is it hype? Is it really are we at the start of a major and disruptive development? What are your feelings? I think a lot of people still consider it like it's unknown. It's difficult to understand. But is it really going to be disruptive, let's say, in the next 3 years for our current business? Let's start with you, Abe.
Well, I mean, you just need to look back at how Bitcoin started. I mean, it was in that genesis block I mentioned, there was actually, it coded into the first transaction was actually a reference to a newspaper article, which was when the second round of quantitative easing was announced by the UK Treasurer. And that was just symptomatic of a broken financial system. A system that's been built layer upon layer upon layer over decades, if not centuries, and today's technology has just surpassed it. It's become, I wouldn't say obsolete, but it just needs replacing with something better and far more efficient. And this is what the blockchain is offering, is a way of completely streamlining and leveling the playing field on the financial services that we all use, and lowering the transaction fees and getting payments around the world much faster and cheaper, and reducing friction and corruption, and that's what blockchain is able to do.
Nice summary. Axel, can you agree with that, or do you have anything to add?
No, I agree. I think that's well summarized.
Okay. Scott, any last remarks from your side? Where do you see things going in the next 3 years? Let's say we organize a similar webinar in 3 years from now. What we will be discussing, and how will we look back on the last 3 years, the coming 3 years, in fact?
I think we'll sort of look at this the same way, just that the way that solar is spreading out where our distribution comes from. I think we're going to see blockchain do the same thing for the actual grid infrastructure. So looking at how do you move from a model where right now the entire electric utility grid, no matter where you are, is based on a system where there's some central command center. And I think when we meet back again in 3 years, we will be looking at the impacts of sort of the first projects that are not controlled in a centralized manner, but controlled in a decentralized manner via blockchain. So I think it'll be pretty cool when we're all back here in 3 years.
Okay, well, let's make that an open invitation and meet again in 3 years. I would like to thank you all, Abraham, Axel, and Scott, for a wonderful presentation and contribution. I'd like to thank all the attendees to stay tuned during the whole webinar, and I hope to see you again one of our next events or our next webinar that we will organize. Thank you again. This was Edwin Coates from Solarplaza, and have a nice day, evening. See you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.